Welcome to the WOOG, guys. The WOOG is that zone that you get in where you have no fear, you have no doubt, and you're able to perform above your abilities. It does not matter what anyone thinks about you. You are going to win and keep winning, and let's learn together about the WOOG and how to utilize it in your life. What's up, guys, and welcome to episode 14 of the WOOG podcast. I am laughing because it's the first time that a guest screwed up the first take. It is always me. Tonight's a very special podcast, for me especially, because we're going to be talking about my mentor, Guillermo Heredia. And he's no longer with us, but we're keeping his memory alive, and we're going to talk about G and the WOOG tonight, because I'll tell you what, I'm pretty sure that this concept came to my head somehow from his memory. So I'm here with Olive Preston, who very accomplished professional, and she has a very special insight into who G was. And G, you called him G because he had his own kind of character, didn't you?
Correct. Yes, he did.
So let's get into it, and tell us who you are first, and then we'll get into the things I want to know that maybe you knew that I didn't know, and let's go from there.
So I'm a business consultant, and a lot of the work that I've done in the last few years is a lot of market intelligence. It's really where I got to meet G, how I got to meet you, just working alongside with a lot of data, information, people, getting to know them, and figuring how we were going to sell our products to them, and it worked out magically.
It definitely did. We worked in the same agency together for quite a while, alongside G, and I'll tell you, the first time I met him, I didn't know what to think of the man, because his suit was a little bit too big, his pants were too short, and they had weird socks on. Come to find out years later that he did all of this on purpose.
Yes,
which is
he did.
Crazy. I ended up pretty much traveling the country with him, selling our agency, and just having the best time of my professional career. So let's get back to you. Olive, what did you do at the agency?
So when I first started there, my role was just to be the operations manager. So I was just taking care of a lot of different facets of the company, human resources, accounting, taking care of the maintenance of the building, anything that had to do with the office, keeping up with the branding, even if it was just making sure there was always enough Fiji water. It was always
there
that
was a
particular
thing about the Fiji water.
It was always that
I never
particular.
understood that.
Yes, so it was always, if you were a branding agency, an advertising agency, you knew exactly what you should also be selling to the people who didn't even know they wanted it. So
wow, I almost want to write that down.
We were always very particular about the amount of even water bottles we had in the agency at all given times, and even how the glasses looked. It all was part of what we sold, and how we brought people along to want to be with us.
It was very interesting, the interest G had in me, because we come from two very different places.
Yes.
I looked at that perfect water glass setup and just kind of like shook my head and was like, I don't really get that. And then we would be in a boardroom together, and G would start presenting, and I'm like, I don't even know what this guy is saying. I have no idea what these words are. I don't understand. Somebody give me a dictionary. So his interest in me was very odd at first. I mean, he was Ivy League educated.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant salesman. He was so good that you didn't know what he was doing until about 9 months later. And we talked about that right before the podcast started.
Yes. So, very interesting type of individual. He knew the basis, the foundation of what every human needed and was looking for. And he took care of that until he digged further down the road to figure out what was the truth. He was a branding therapist. He knew where to start.
Branding therapist? Man, you were just all on.
He knew where to start, and he knew where to take it. And it was literally, like he always said, the client always knew most. There's just so much that us outside can do. There's just as much as research can show, but the people already within the company already know what's happening. They just don't want to say it. And it's really giving therapy to each of those individuals until they say it out loud or you figure it out.
It's giving them bravery.
Giving them
gave them bravery
to say it.
I saw that many times.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you sat at this table and said, Chris, what's this podcast about? And you were if this is episode 14, you were the 13 or 14 people that have said that. And I said, you're gonna know what this is about in 2 seconds.
Now I know.
Now you know.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you don't know, this is the WOOG podcast, and the WOOG is a zone that you get into where you cannot fail. There is no fear. Success is imminent. Ooh, I like that. Look, you're bringing
Big
that
words.
out to me.
Big words.
He used them too.
Spelling bee contest next week, 2019 champion.
Oh man. Okay. So now that you know, as of 10 minutes ago, what you're actually doing here at 10 o'clock at night, while we talk about my mentor and who became your fiance, and talk a little bit about that process.
Well, that was a very weird and it was so funny that we both saw it that same way. It was very weird. I had worked in the agency for almost 3 years, and we worked a lot together because of the fact that he opened my eyes to market research, and then noticing that I had a lot of intellectuality into how to get things done with research information,
right.
with especially qualitative research.
Things that guys like me have no clue and
you don't. He knew a little. He had no idea. I can actually, it was different because all of a sudden I was able to run a statistical number against what people thought and give a reality of people were going to respond to it.
I had no idea what your report said. I didn't want to know. I was like, I guess this is just an olive thing and have a nice day. It's interesting to me because I always called him the king of the boardroom.
Yes, he was.
Because he was meticulous in how he came into the boardroom, where he sat, how he was silent at first, and then when he would open his mouth, he owned it. Like everybody knew who was in charge from then on out. Yes. And he ran the show. As a natural salesman, when you get to that selling point and you give that final push and there's that silence, I mean, it's a very old and respected rule that you keep your mouth shut until the client would talk. And he would challenge that because he had one line that he would say, and we were talking about it right before. He would say, I don't want to get it wrong because I'll never forget it. They're just about to sign on the first agreement, and he would say, you don't sound convinced. And as a salesman, I was about to kick him under the table. I'm like, they're about to sign. What are you doing? What are you doing? And then I would figure out later on exactly what he was doing. He wasn't thinking about contract 1.
No, he was not, ever.
He was thinking about contract 10.
Yes.
And that, I believe, is what made him special as a salesman. And I believe that he transcended what I call the WOOG, which is the zone to close. He would close, and he would close 9 contracts later on the first contract.
Yes, he did.
That is special. That is not even the WOOG. You have to give that a new name. And since you're branding the crap out of everything tonight, maybe by the end of this, we'll get a new name for closing the first contract and the 10th one in the exact same meeting. That's
what you have to do.
I don't know if that's what you have to do. I've never met anybody who's been able to do that before. So he took me under his wing, and we traveled together to close deals. And my job was the digital end. Yes. And his job was the branding end. And we had a great chemistry.
Yes, you guys did.
Especially on the road. But it was interesting to me that if you ever watched him before meetings, he was a nutcase. He's speed walking, and you know what I'm talking about, with these goofy socks that I couldn't understand, but later came to understand that they were the first talking point with his short pants.
Yes.
Because there was no way to miss them.
Yes, it was done on purpose, and it was so funny. I've noticed that with the years of working beside him, was sitting at a table. You always thought that his jacket looked a little too big, just like every other corporate guy on the desk.
That drove me crazy.
And then, yet you looked under the table, and he had Superman socks on.
With like Italian dress shoes.
With it $3,000 Italian dress shoes on. Yes, it was very true. And I mean, he was always dressed to the T, but his thing was his socks, and it was always a talking point for him. And the thing is that he never had to bring them up. Everyone else around the room did.
There was no way to miss them.
You couldn't miss them.
There's sometimes they were American flag, or sometimes they were Superman, or whatever.
Oh, you don't want to know the type of socks that they were there.
They did not fit in that room.
Correct, and that was his whole point. It was his small hidden thing of who he was that he didn't have to put out on the table. You were going to find out regardless.
I mean, I always just never understood what the man was saying when he was in the boardroom. I promise you, I never got it. And, you know, when he was no longer with us, the thing I wrote on social media was, the second he opened his mouth, you knew he was the smartest guy in the room.
Yes.
And you just shut up until he looked at you and it was time for you to talk about your little part. So this podcast, again, is about the Woog. I want to know what you think his was, because it's different for everybody I interview. What do you think his was? What do you think his zone was like? Because he was eccentric. He would be in the office at 3 a.m. He'd be at the office at like 1 p.m. some days. Like, you just didn't know. He was just, I think he was almost a little bit misunderstood in his woogness.
So if we're going to talk about his woogness, I'm going to tell you very honestly, because it was something that I had to learn with the years that I was with him. It was, never forget waking up myself in the middle of the night and realizing he wasn't there. And I'd walk downstairs to his office, and he was in there typing away. And I mean, we just probably had fallen asleep a couple hours before, when I would find him and be like, hey, you're not in bed. And it was, you would see in his eyes how enlightened he was. And he was so appreciative of being in the now, in the knowing that right now is the biggest thought I've had about this, and that he needed to put it into his vase where he couldn't let it go. He was never afraid of being up at 3 a.m. to make something beautiful come alive, just as much as if he knew I have to wait until 1 p.m. for that to come alive, he will wait, and he had patience.
God, I love this project.
I
love this project. He knew when it was time.
He knew when it was time, and he would, and this happened many times, we literally could just be sitting somewhere watching TV, doing something, and he'd jump up. And one of the things that he did during the last year of his life was, I had placed this big whole foot to tall mirror in our living room, and all I remember is we were talking over a movie, and he just jumps off the couch. He goes, I get it. And I'm like, you get what? And he looks at me and he goes, I need to write this down somewhere. And he's looking at me like, what do I do?
I never saw that in your home, but I saw that in airports.
Okay, so yeah, he would just jump up, and he literally was like, I need to write this down. And all I can think of was, I gave him a marker, and he went up to the glass mirror that we had that was from the ceiling to the floor, and he just started to write on it. And he just wrote down all his ideas, and you see this board just build up with all of this thinking that he had, and all of this bursting ideology, all of this I do not even know how to explain when you watch a genius just write it on the walls.
Just knew it was time for him to
write it down.
Get it out.
Yeah.
Right. And he would get angry at people sometimes in the office, I remember. And he would get angry when they weren't keeping up with, not him, because that would be difficult, but not explaining what they had in their head too.
Correct.
Right.
So he was one of those, he worked well with procrastination, but when he was ready, he really bursted in ways that it was literally seeing a rainbow come about in the middle of the night, even when it was 3 a.m. It was beautiful to watch. I got to watch it various times of his mindset. Just was something that I've never seen before in my life.
It's something I had never seen before.
It's something that I'm thankful I got to watch. I've noticed there's some special people out there in the world who can do stuff like that.
I mean, I'm with you on that 100%. Just having had the time traveling and in the office with him, I learned something kind of weird every day, but it made so much sense 6 months later. How in the world did that man have that kind of foresight for what a company needed as far as companies create ad plans all the time, and you and I both know that they're crap. They're for the bureaucratic stats above. But what they really needed, he had 6 months before they knew they needed it.
And that was a very big deal. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why me and I.
It's okay. Podcast, we screw up. By the way, here, I'll help you out. Ready for this? Fuck.
Okay.
Which was one of his favorite words, by the way.
Yeah.
But whenever somebody screws up, like on a podcast, you just keep going. Go.
So one of the things that I really noticed with him was what he woke up within me was that understanding of people before even they knew what they needed. And that was his thing. And that was, I studied it in school and I fell in love with it. I just never knew that you could apply it. And that was his thing for me, was that he taught me, or he opened the door for me to realize how I can apply those type of skills. Because he noticed, you know what people want from now. But I didn't know how to say those things. I didn't know how to make it manifest into something. And that was what's special about him. He knew how to manifest those understandings and those strategies. I can put them on paper and I can tell you, this is what I know somebody may want, but I do not know what he did in the manner of, I know how I'm going to convince them already that that's what they want. I could not get to that point. And that was something that was so out of the extraordinary about him. It was not that we knew already the people need this, is him knowing how to turn on the light to everyone of, I have to have this.
You tell a corporate career person, I was being nice there, something that is not in line with something that's going to make them look good instantly, and the face you get back is, you're crazy. But he could convince them that they needed that, and that's a talent that most people never see. But then when it comes true,
so the thing is,
that's a different kind of level.
Chris, let's be very honest. These corporate people already know this. They know it. Now the difference is, I even went to business school, and this was one of the things they even taught me in a class, was that sometimes we are so in fear of losing that promotion, we're so in fear of losing our job, that we're willing to follow what is so conservative about our job instead of taking risks.
Right, it's just a simple instinct of trying to keep your livelihood.
Correct.
Because your boss might hate this idea.
But just as much is any risk that an entrepreneur would take to break the silence in an entire market, and everybody stays in shock that they did it. And G was an entrepreneur where he was willing to give you that idea and make you break your silence in your industry, But it was up to you to decide, do I want to be that person? Do I want to protect myself? Or do I want to become this unexpected, well-renowned person who changed the livelihood of a company? So it's either, you take a risk like G would do all the time, and whoever followed him got a lot of love back, or be someone who was so comfortable and so hidden that you still got the same paycheck, but you never got out of that area. And that was for me, his wug, if you want to call it, was
the W-U-G, wug.
The wug, however you want to say it. The wug, la wog, la dejadilla, la wog.
Don't get it.
However you want to say it.
It's
all
an Irish branding thing. Come on.
Welcome to Miami. But regardless of what it was, what I realized that he loved so much was he loved shaking up people with what he knew. And he knew that people loved how he shook them up.
Yeah, okay, so now we're gonna pivot. And I use this word every episode.
Okay.
Do you know where G actually closed deals? Right?
So, yeah. I
wasn't
wasn't there usually, but yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
I was. So it was very fine dining restaurants. It was things like that. And you're not allowed to say that anymore, right? Because entertaining clients is, a thing of the past, apparently. So G was a master of closing at restaurants or high-end bars or wherever he thought the best venue was for the client that he was dealing with. And everything would be set perfectly.
So let's make sure that we listen to this very carefully. That is actually not true.
Oh, I like this.
There were certain individuals that those were the ways to get them. And there were certain individuals where you were at Monty's. And they were,
you know what? I was about to get fired up for our good old Chris and Olive when we first met fight, but you are absolutely correct.
So if anybody,
it would be Smith and Malinsky's or would be Monty's, and he would know exactly. But if it was Smith's, he would make sure they knew we were coming, that the back table was ready, was perfect. Drinks were on the table, shrimp cocktail. He just had it down.
Just as much as he knew that if you were going to show up at Monty's, it was at the time where usually there was going to be a certain artist playing that was part of you. He knew exactly if you needed a painkiller with a number 3 or a number 1. He was just someone. He was, like I said.
Okay, let's clarify that that's a drink.
That's a drink. That's a drink. So Monty's is a famous painkiller drink, and either you have painkiller 1 that has 1 shot, painkiller 2 that has 2 shots, or painkiller 3 that had 3 shots. So he knew about how tense you were.
I absolutely love that. And you know what? When people would come in from out of town,
yes,
from the second they got there, everything was taken care of.
Yes.
And this is a type of selling that I believe is lost.
And guys, do not be afraid to know that I had to set all that up.
I have zero doubt, because I don't think G could set up the teas and the glasses and any of that if it saved his life.
Oh boy, I made sure those sugars were 5 only, specifically in a row.
Yeah, and you know what? He made sure that I was in line with what I was supposed to be doing there.
Yes.
He wanted me in the room a second beforehand.
Yes.
Right before him, like a minute before him. And to introduce myself, and then he'd come in right after, a minute late. Everything was meticulous. And that is something that I don't think I will ever forget.
Yes, everything was meticulous. And it's like any brand in the world. And, I've even noticed that after his passing. I don't know if it's just my aggressiveness of missing him or knowing about his brilliance, is noticing a lot of faults of a lot of people, a lot of work that's being done out there, that I can hear him say out loud where they missed something. And I find myself all the time saying out loud things that I learned by just reading through his work, understanding what he was doing. And I find his words slipping through my own lips about how things are not how as amazing as he knew how to make them. And he definitely knew
he had like
how
a
to do it.
crystal ball of the wook. He kind of did. Like he did. And you know, my favorite memory always is I would think I was getting to the office early. Be like 6:30 in the morning.
No, you weren't. You were late.
The times that I did get there at 6:30 in the morning, because by the way, guys, the office is on Miami Beach and it doesn't open until 10.
Of course not.
Right. But I think I was getting there early, and I would walk through the door, and his office was a straight right down, and you would see him bent over his computer with his glasses and just and you were like, what in the world does this man do? Like, this is craziness.
He rarely slept.
No, I know. We actually have 4 minutes left now. Olive, I want you to plug what you're doing now. Thank you so much for being on episode 14. Now it's time to self-promo, which I know you don't love.
I don't like this at all. I don't like this part.
Well, hey, I'll self-promo you if you want.
Go ahead. Let him do the magic. He knows me better than I do, obviously.
Okay, here we go. So if you need data that can back up what's about to happen in the future, you call Olive for market research and consulting and business consulting. And if you happen to be a man like me who was a lot like G, where we're salesmen and we need to be kept in line, also call Olive for business consulting.
That's so true. Okay, I'll take that. That's a great sales pitch. I'll take that.
I told you I would do it well. Again, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Olive. It's 10 p.m., but this was a special episode, and I'm so happy that you were here for it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for keeping G's memory alive. I love you for that, and I love everyone around that remembers how
Special.
No. Special is too little bit of word for men like that.
Of course you would correct me.
I always have.
All right, we're out of time. Thank you guys so much.